Former CFTC Chairman Giancarlo has been one of the most important people in defining how regulators think about cryptocurrency. When he talks about digital assets like XRP and XLM, he's not guessing what the price will be. He's talking about the basics that affect how many people use them, how useful they are, and how relevant they will be in the future. This makes his comments important for everyone who wants to know what really makes XRP and XLM grow. Giancarlo doesn't care about casual opinions or social media excitement. He cares about the infrastructure, regulatory certainty, and real-world integration that make demand last. Giancarlo's past gives him a unique perspective of view. He was in charge of digital asset markets, derivatives, and compliance frameworks when he was chairman of the Commodity Futures Trading Commission. He knows from experience how regulation, acceptance, and institutional interest all come together, and why that intersection typically determines which cryptocurrencies do well and which ones don't. When Giancarlo talks about XRP and XLM, he talks about how useful they are, how they connect with financial institutions, and how they solve actual problems. These are the traits that decide if a digital asset becomes a useful part of the financial system or stays speculative or marginal. XRP and XLM both have distinct jobs to do in the financial system. XRP is all about making it easier to move money across borders. It lets banks and payment processors move money quickly and easily without having to put money in accounts in the currency of the destination first. Its on-demand liquidity ODL protocol is already working in several corridors, which shows that it can make real-world payments easier and cheaper. XLM puts a lot of emphasis on financial inclusion. Its network is set up to make cheap transfers and cooperate with fintech companies, which helps those who don't have a lot of money get financial services. XLM's design makes it easy to handle a lot of tiny transactions, which makes it a great choice for growing markets. Giancarlo often says that these use cases are why adoption is more important than market excitement. Institutions only use digital assets that help with real-world challenges. Giancarlo lists a few key things that affect how people use XRP and XLM. Banks and payment providers that are part of an institution are more likely to use digital assets that save costs, make it easier to get cash, and follow the rules. Clear laws and regulations make it safe for institutions to use digital assets without worrying about breaking the law or following the rules. Giancarlo has said several times that regulation is not an obstacle but a tool to get people to use something. XRP and XLM are made to work with existing financial systems. This means that they can be used in real-life financial situations, not merely as tests. XRP and XLM show real usefulness in real-world situations like remittances, micropayments, and liquidity corridors. By knowing these drivers, holders and observers can judge how likely it is that something will be adopted based on genuine metrics and developments instead of guesswork. Giancarlo's views are especially important right now because things are changing so quickly. More banks and other financial institutions are testing out blockchain-based payment systems. More and more emerging markets are using low-cost digital transfers. CBDC projects are testing how well they work with each other, which is similar to how XRP and XLM work as bridges. This is a sign for investors or crypto fans to pay attention to trends in how people use cryptocurrencies in the real world. These trends show if a network is becoming more useful and important, which is a better way to judge its long-term potential than just looking at price changes. In the next part, we'll talk more about the precise adoption triggers that Giancarlo talks about, as well as the institutional integrations, corridor expansions, CBDC cooperation, and regulatory changes that are making XRP and XLM more useful in the real world. We'll look at how each aspect works, why it's important for the networks, and what people should pay attention to in order to grasp how XRP and XLM are changing the way financial infrastructure works. This part isn't about guessing. It's about figuring out how to make things last and be useful, which Giancarlo always says are the fundamental reasons behind the growth of digital assets. Giancarlo has always said that digital assets like XRP and XLM will only grow and be useful if people use them in the real world. For him, adoption isn't just a thought. It's something you can measure, see, and connect to how these networks function with financial systems, institutions, and rules. To understand why XRP and XLM continue to get attention from banks, fintechs, and payment providers, you need to know what these adoption catalysts are. Institutional integration is the first and most important factor that will lead to adoption. XRP and XLM were created with banks and other financial institutions in mind. With XRP's on-demand liquidity ODL, banks and payment processors can move money across borders right away without having to pre-fund accounts in the destination currency. XLM makes it easy and cheap to send money, which is especially useful for smaller banks and fintechs that want to help those who don't have a bank account. Giancarlo says that businesses choose assets that lower costs, make things run more smoothly, and follow the rules. The number of live corridors, the amount of transactions, and how well it works with financial infrastructure are all ways to quantify this adoption. Every new adoption milestone is important because it shows that the product works. Speculative interest changes dependent on how people feel about the network, but institutional acceptance shows that the network is solving genuine problems for real users. The growth of payment corridors is another big reason why people are using them. XRP already works in a number of busy corridors, allowing for rapid settlements between currencies like the US dollar, the euro, the Mexican peso, and the Philippine peso. XLM's ability to send money cheaply adds to these efforts in smaller or less served markets. Giancarlo says that the network effect of a digital asset gets stronger the more financial corridors use it. Every new corridor increases liquidity, proves that use cases work, and encourages more people to use them. This is especially significant in areas where it takes a long time or costs a lot to send money across borders. XRP and XLM are becoming more and more known as infrastructure tools, not merely speculative assets, because they offer a practical answer. Giancarlo always says that clear rules are very important for adoption. Before adding digital assets to their operations, banks and other financial institutions need clear rules for how to follow them. Banks like XRP because it focuses on compliance and has a history of working with authorities. XLM's work with regulated fintechs shows how to get people to use it in areas where there aren't many banks. When regulators make the regulations clear, institutions can safely add these assets without worrying about breaking the law. Giancarlo says that this regulatory congruence is stronger than any market buzz since it makes sure that adoption will last. Central bank digital currency CBDCs are becoming more and more important, and Giancarlo has said that interoperability is a vital component in their development. XRP and XLM are set up to connect traditional fiat money with digital currencies, letting banks and governments shift money around quickly and easily. XRP, for example, can help different CBDCs work together to make cross-border liquidity easier. In areas that are implementing digital currency systems, XLM can help with micropayments and efforts to include more people in the financial system. These integrations show that the networks are useful in the real world, and that adoption is not just a theory, but is in line with how the global financial system is changing. Giancarlo talks about adoption feedback loops a lot. Every new cooperation with an institution, development of a corridor, or integration of a CBDC makes the network more useful. These feedback loops are very important because they lead to growth that keeps going. Adoption leads to more adoption, and every successful integration makes the networks more useful. For people who are watching, following these loops gives them useful information about adoption trends, which is much more useful than guessing about price changes. Some recent adoption instances show how these ideas work. Banks and payment processors are making XRPODL corridors bigger in a number of areas. Fintech services powered by XLM that let people send money to one another cheaply in developing countries. Pilot programs are examining how well fiat, tokenized assets, and digital currencies work together. Giancarlo says that the signals that matter are these real-world uses. Every additional integration, pilot, or corridor expansion shows that it works, builds trust, and makes a stronger argument for more widespread use. For people who own XRP and XLM, it's really important to know what makes people want to use them. Giancarlo says to keep an eye on cooperation between institutions and the growth of corridors. Keep an eye on changes in the law that could affect compliance and adoption. Keep an eye on CBDC projects that use or test XRP XLM networks. Keep an eye out for network effect development, which happens when adoption in one location makes it easier for other areas to adopt as well. By looking at these things, people can learn more about how XRP and XLM are becoming more or less important over time, beyond just what people think or guess. XRP and XLM are important because people use them. Giancarlo says that institutional integration, corridor extension, regulatory certainty, and CBDC interoperability are the main drivers. Feedback loops for adoption increase credibility and network strength. Long-term utility is based on real-world